The 2021 summit is a collaboration between LIM College and FashionDex.com. This year's sponsors are Tex World New York City and Apparel Sourcing New York City. I would like to invite Nancy Miller to come and welcome you all. Nancy.
Thank you, Monica. I'd like to begin by introducing myself. I'm Nancy Miller. I'm the chair of fashion merchandising and marketing here at LIM College. And it's wonderful to have you all here, both near and far, on behalf of the college, where sustainability is part not only of our curriculum, but part of our core values. It is my honor to kick off the 4th annual Sustainability Summit. Today, we have assembled many thought leaders and agents of change. We have lots of speakers. We have students who are going to be a part of today. And I think you're going to learn and share and converse. So again, I'd like to thank you on behalf of LIM College and FashionDex.
Hello, everybody. It's Monica Ricosi again. Welcome back to the Fashion and Sustainability Summit. The summit is a collaboration of LIM College and FashionDex. Our sponsors this year is Tex World New York City and Apparel Sourcing New York City. We are about to have a conversation on sustainability at Tapestry and Reformation. With us today, we have Logan Duran from Tapestry, Carrie Freeman from Reformation, Andrea Kennedy from LIM College and FashionDex, Marcel Smith from LIM College, and Callie Compton from LIM College. With that, I'm going to hand this over to Andrea. Andrea, take it away.
Thanks so much, Monica, and thanks LIM and FashionDex. And a big thank you to Carrie Freeman, Director of Sustainability at Reformation, and Logan Duran, Director of Sustainability at Tapestry. And I'm excited to have this conversation with both of you, as well as with Marcel and Callie, who are two of our soon-to-be graduating students who are sensational sustainable thinkers and really excited to be part of this conversation. I'm going to hand over to both of them to ask most of the questions. I might chime in with one, but with that, take it away, Marcel.
Thank you, Professor Kennedy. And before we get into our questions, I would love to start with both of you, just going over a little bit of your background and who you are and what you do at your respective companies. Logan, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I've been at Tapestry about 2 years now. Previously, before Tapestry, was at PVH, and then before that was actually on the West Coast, working at Patagonia for about 4.5, 5 years. And then I'm actually a boomerang when it comes to my career. I actually started my career at Coach. Obviously, Coach, ultimately became Tapestry, but throughout my career, it's always been a focus on sustainability, always been a focus on how to measure and then find ways to help organizations reduce their environmental impact. And that's really what I work on here at Tapestry across a broad spectrum of ESG topics with a big focus on sustainability, focused on environmental impact across both our own operations as well as within our supply chain.
Great. Thank you so much. Carrie, what about you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am currently the Director of Sustainability at Reformation. I joined Reformation in 2014 to help build the brand supply chain and sourcing strategies. And currently as Director, I direct programs that range from sustainable sourcing, traceability, social and environmental responsibility, and sustainability messaging to drive customer engagement. My background is actually in product development. I studied at Central St. Martin's in London and worked in the industry in New York for a few years. Began to ask questions, about how and where things were made, and really wasn't satisfied with the responses I received. So I then went on to take a graduate degree course in socially responsible and sustainable apparel business at the University of Delaware to learn how things could be done better, and also spent some time in the nonprofit sector building the first sustainable material library and consulting different brands with the CFDA on how they could source more sustainable materials. And I also prior to that, had my own brand in sustainable women's wear, which is called Carrie Perry, to kind of combine all of those skill sets from sustainability to design.
So Carrie, in your current role right now, can you kind of walk us through like what the day-to-day looks like?
Yeah, so we recently grew our team quite a lot this past year. So we have 5 team members right now, and we really work, with our supply chain, both on environmental and responsibility improvements, whether that's in sourcing better materials, digging deeper into traceability, chemical management. We also work very cross-functionally with our marketing team on that messaging, and kind of the day-to-day really ranges so much, and it's a really exciting path, and because we're really able to have that impact on whether that's our employees, our communities, or our supply chains.
And Logan, I want to also ask you the same question. What does the day-to-day look like for you?
I mean, the day-to-day is a lot of just staring at Zoom, lots and lots of conversations and meetings, but very, very, very similar to what Carrie is saying. I mean, we are, up until recently, we're also growing our team. We actually had a woman start this week on product sustainability at the organization, and we have a gentleman starting next week focused on traceability, which we're really excited about. So we're growing our ESG and sustainability team, but we cover a broad array of topics, right? We have specific goals and targets and ambitions across the organizations on our 3 pillars of people, planet, and communities. And so we're really just trying to address where there is the most impact within our value chain. As we'll probably talk a little bit about, a lot of that sits within raw materials and product. And so we work really closely with product development, and with our material development teams, just on how do we both define preferred materials, but then how do we sort of increase adoption. So there's both the innovation, trial, testing side of things, as well as the challenging and what you'll find, I think, sort of at any organization, the impossible question of sustainability, which is better, and you're always sort of left with like, unfortunately, the answer is always it depends. Right. And so I think we're sort of working through a lot of those types of challenges and conversations within our own product development teams and our merchandising teams. And so just trying to embed within the organization as much as possible this idea of how do we both measure and reduce environmental impact.
I must say, as a student who is very passionate about sustainability, it's very inspiring to hear that you both are growing your teams within this field. That's amazing to hear. But I've also realized that sustainability is a very broad term. And so I'm wondering if, I'll start with you, Logan, with this question. How does your company view sustainability?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we definitely look at, we try and take a holistic approach to purpose. As I mentioned, we have 3 specific pillars, which, in the more sort of investor-facing speak is termed ESG, environmental social governance. But within the organization, it covers both the people side of things, as well as the communities that we operate in, as well as the sort of environmental impact of making and selling product all over the world. And so we really are trying and have been working really feverishly over the last couple of years on how to really embed that into the organization, and creating a clear path, all starting from design all the way through to delivery of product, on how to ultimately reduce the environmental impact of moving and shipping and meeting the needs and the sort of desires of customers. And so it's a tough one to really define, but ultimately it's something that we try and put data next to. And what we talk a lot about is at Tapestry is sort of this marrying of magic and logic, which I think is sort of this idea that you probably will hear resonate across several different brands in sort of many different ways. But how do you provide data to people to make strong data decisions, while also acknowledging that there is beauty and aesthetic and art in fashion, and so much of that needs to be represented as well. And so how do you how do you bring those two together in a meaningful way to deliver sort of meaningful products to our customers?
Carrie, do you have a similar point of view, or how does your company view sustainability?
Yeah, such a great question. So, similar. Reformation was started in 2009, with a mission to bring sustainable fashion to everyone. And it's a really simple statement, but actually packs a lot into it. So the idea of like sustainable fashion, is meaning that we want to make sure that we're leading with product first, that we're not compromising on style or quality or function. And sustainability here, is meant to be broad. It's about doing the right thing for people and the planet. And it really influences not just the product that we make, but fundamentally how we work and how we operate. So, our sustainability framework focuses on 4 key pillars: people, planet, product, and progress. For people, our focuses are around social responsibility, community engagement and impact, and DE&I. And planet encompasses climate action, resource efficiency, and low impact care. Product covers our goals around better materials, clean chemistry, and traceability. And last but not least is progress. And this is really, about pushing sustainability forward. So we wrap up, circularity, packaging innovations, and maintaining best practices and reporting and governance here.
Thank you both. I'm going to pass it over to Callie now.
Yes. So Carrie, you mentioned talking about caring about the people and the planet and also like progress. So I'll just start with you with this question, but there are so many possible sustainable products and business practices that you can do. So how do you decide which areas to tackle and then which areas to hold off on?
Yeah, such a good question. So we want to provide our customers, with more sustainable options across categories. Recently, we launched Ref Active, which is our activewear line, and we relaunched our shoe collection this past year. And with both of these categories, we wanted to remind customers that they don't have to compromise on sustainability in order to have stylish clothing. For shoes, we also wanted to create a necessary conversation around dress footwear specifically, which is a long overlooked area of the industry when it comes to sustainability, and see how we can work with our supply chains and other brands to do better. In terms of business practices, we announced last year that Reformation will be climate positive by 2025. We've been thank you, carbon, waste, and water neutral since 2015. But we believe that neutral isn't good enough. So with this commitment, we're going further to actively reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and invest in solutions that have a net positive impact. And this goal really drives many of our initiatives around better materials, circularity, transportation, and energy management. And I think many other industry groups and leading brands have made important climate commitments, but we felt that there was not enough urgency or immediate action here. So, we can't wait until 2040. Accelerating progress is imperative in order to protect our people and our planet. So that was kind of one of the areas that we decided was necessary to tackle, and we really hope to inspire others to join us in this move.
That's amazing. It's great to see that you're really homing in on what you think would be the most beneficial for your company and also for those pillars that you had talked about. So Logan, how is Tapestry, like which areas are you tackling with sustainability and which ones are you kind of holding off on?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I resonate with what Carrie was saying just around, we can't wait till 2040. I think it's really interesting that a lot of folks talk a lot about, we want to do this for our grandkids. And I think if you look at the science and what we're hearing, it's not about our grandkids, it's actually about us. And I think that's sort of a shift in the mindset that we're dealing with the impacts of climate change now, and they're only going to get exacerbated. And so we definitely are trying to prioritize effort and work around climate change. Most recently, Tapestry committed to setting a science-based target, and we're currently working on what that target will be. Obviously, it needs to have sort of actionable results and really be comprehensive, right? And so once you get into deep dive supply chain, that's ultimately where the environmental impact sits. But it's also sort of where your sphere of influence as a brand or as an organization starts to diminish, right? And so that's where we've really been leaning on the opportunity for collaborations across the industry. With respect to how we prioritize work, as I mentioned, we have specific goals focused on 2025. So within the next few years, around our people, focused on things like EI&D, representation, inclusion. How do you create mobility within the organization, work-life balance, as well as communities is sort of the second pillar of our work. And that's really focused on volunteering and more philanthropic work, as well as engaging with the workers in our supply chain and trying to provide empowerment programs as sort of continued support for their day-to-day. And ultimately all getting to a point where we're providing, the same way you would be at a corporate office and have some access to different services, trying to provide those to workers as well. And then on the planet side, we're looking at, reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions across both scope 1 and scope 2. Recently committed to 100% renewable electricity in our own operations by 2025, and are working towards things like 95% traceability of our key raw materials, as well as 90% adoption of gold and silver rated leather working group leathers from the tanneries that we work with. It's a challenge to sort of prioritize because everyone wants to do everything, but unfortunately organizations don't necessarily have those resources. So as sustainability professionals, we really operate in many instances as conveners and sort of the aggregators of different teams and helping to set strategy, and then trying to lay foundation and set guiding principles for the teams to then execute on. We're not going to go out and develop all the raw materials. We're not going to go out and develop new factories or product. I'm not a designer, but can I provide the tools and the principles that the teams need in order to make good decisions and a more environmentally preferred decision? And so it definitely becomes a challenge. The last thing that I'll say with respect to prioritization is, we undergo every few years a materiality assessment, which is effectively an opportunity for us to reach out to all of our stakeholders and ask them questions about, what is most important to you as a stakeholder? And stakeholders defined broadly as both leadership, board of directors, employees, suppliers, NGOs that we work with, academics, as well as investors. And really trying to get a sense and prioritization of what are the most pressing topics for them and where do we as a business have opportunity for influence, and ultimately trying to use that tool as a way to make sure that we're prioritizing what's most important and what's ultimately going to have the most opportunity for impact.
Thank you. That's really great. You talked a lot about using the collaboration and also inclusion within working throughout your supply chain and production, which I think is super important. So do any challenges or risks or even obstacles surface in terms of your supply chain, especially like during the pandemic? That was a really hard time for a lot of people within the fashion industry. And are there any, like aha moments or lessons that you learned from all of that uncertainty? So Logan or Carrie, one of you can answer.
I can start.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so it was definitely tricky to navigate issues, within our supply chain. I think for all brands throughout the pandemic and still happening. But in line with our commitment to collaborative, supplier relationships and worker well-being in our supply chain, it was really important for us to work closely with our suppliers to find the best way to kind of navigate through the pandemic together. Our teams are still staying really close in conversation with our suppliers, and we're factoring, different circumstances into our purchasing decisions to ensure that we're doing our part to protect global garment workers in our supply chains. So I think, if anything, the aha moment for me was really the validation of how impactful a brand's purchasing practices can be on worker well-being, and how important, building and fostering mutually beneficial long-term supplier relationships are. I think COVID-19 in particular has been such a great opportunity to accelerate those close and collaborative partnerships. And we hope that other brands, have been using this opportunity as well. But it just led to so much attention on purchasing practices. The Better Buying Initiative really took off. And I think that was one of the positive outcomes of the pandemic, was attention to how a brand can, negatively or positively impact working conditions within the supply chain.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo exactly what Carrie was saying, that, very similar experience at Tapestry, and really just prioritizing the need to continue to foster great working relationships with your suppliers, and just really understanding what that relationship and how powerful that relationship can be, and how building and fostering strong relationships with your suppliers is ultimately going to deliver on sort of your goals as an organization. I do think, it definitely, the pandemic has been an opportunity for us to continue to reevaluate diversification of supply chain, and just making sure that you're able to deliver to the needs of customers. But I think it also allowed our design teams to really just sort of pause for a minute and to slow down for a minute, right? They slowed down for like maybe 2 months, and then they just like ratcheted it up, which was both exciting but also, really important. And I think we've seen a lot of really great testing and learning and pilots come out of and continue to come out of sort of having this opportunity to pause and reevaluate the way we work, right? And so Coach brand launched a reloved program. It's basically an initial step into circularity, where what was really fascinating, we've been, at Coach, we've been repairing products for decades, right? We have this longstanding commitment to craftsmanship, and we will continue to commit to it. And we have a repair center in New Jersey, and they've been, over the last 3 years, I think they've repaired over 115,000 products, right? And so, continuing to do that work. But sometimes from time to time, they'll get a product back that is unrepairable, and it ends up going into a shelf in a box, and it ultimately sort of just sits there. And oftentimes, that would go to sample sales, and then ultimately, what we looked at is this opportunity to basically open those boxes up, because we didn't have in-person sample sales anymore. And so the craftspeople and the design teams opened those boxes up, and they started to reimagine what that could be, or how would you fix it? How would you change it to make it a more to make it a product that could be sold again, right? And so keeping those products out of landfill and ultimately getting them back into circulation. And so we saw some really great movement in that area, and we really just sort of seen the repair center almost transform from focus solely on repair to focusing on how do we sort of reimagine, how do we upcraft, how do you create partnerships with design And then that ultimately sort of feeds back into the conversation of designing for circularity and starting to get at some of the challenges of, yeah, we make a leather bag that is ultimately sort of this sandwich of a liner, some type of stiffening agent, some stiffening board, and a leather. And how do you get it so that can be pulled apart or that can be reused? And so you start to think a little bit differently on construction. And so, do we have it all figured out? No, but I do think it's been a nice opportunity for us to sort of pause and figure out how to really dig into the sort of these new ways of working and new ways of thinking about how we design and deliver products, and how we really keep products in play as long as possible.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. Both of you talked a lot about, taking a pause and kind of reimagining your supply chain. And I also like how you mentioned, reimagining certain products, that were kind of getting lost within the supply chain since, we weren't able to do things in person anymore. So that was all very, very interesting. I'm going to pass it over to Marcel to ask a couple more questions.
Yeah. Logan, you said something earlier that I kind of want to touch upon when you talked about setting science-based targets and also keeping product out of landfills. I'm wondering if you can give us some more insight on some measurable initiatives that your company has in place to meet your sustainable goals, because I know that Tapestry has made some pretty awesome strides in that department.
Yeah. Have you guys talked about science-based targets at this conference? I mean, I can give sort of like a minute on that if that's helpful.
Yeah, if you could, please.
Sure. So the best analogy that I can think of from a science-based target perspective is, you go to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, you've got high cholesterol, you need to lose weight. And so you go home, you get really excited and you join a gym, you start eating well. You go back a year later and you say, doctor, this is fantastic, I lost 2 pounds. And he sort of looks at you and he says like, great, but this was actually like a 35-pound problem, right? So that's ultimately science-based targets, which is to say, yes, people are setting these targets and ambitions for reducing their emissions, but is it going far enough to really address what the best available science is telling us? And so what we've seen over the last several years is, as the science and the data on and the modeling on climate change is becoming more and more available, there's this ambition or there's this focus on making sure that companies are setting targets that really addresses those issues. And so, yeah, we don't have the answers yet. We currently measure scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, and we report those in our corporate responsibility report. We also have goals and targets set for our scope 3 emissions focused on transportation. But what we know is that a lot of the impact, the majority of the impact sits within the tier 1 factories and within the raw material suppliers and the raw material creation. And so we're currently underway to both measure and set our baseline for scope 3 emissions, and then ultimately working with an organization to set that science-based target to make sure that we're setting the right ambitions. I think it's, access to the data and developing action and abatement plans is challenging work. But again, as we talked about earlier, by setting up and creating strong relationships with our suppliers, it allows us to really prioritize and to work with those suppliers in ways to ultimately reduce our emissions over time.
That makes a lot of sense. We already have quite a few questions coming in the chat box, and I want to make sure that we get to as many as we can. The first one's going to be for you, Carrie. It comes from Ken. He's asking about Reformation and what they considered recycled garments. So he says, Reformation recycles hundreds of thousands of garments. Exactly how does Reformation define what is counted as a recycled garment? What percentage of the garment is reused or upcycled in the new garment?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in terms of when we say recycling garments, we're looking at what we're doing to keep products and materials in use and out of the landfill. So we launched our ref recycling program in partnership with ThreadUp a few years ago now, and happy to see that there's a lot of other brands that have also gotten on board with similar products. So we have customers sending in Reformation products or other branded products as well. that then get resold on ThreadUp. So those numbers are being counted. We also have online vintage collections that we sell online, as well as having our own vintage store in Los Angeles. And then also offering one-of-a-kind vintage pieces in the Lower East Side location in New York City. So those numbers, as well as anything we donate, are going here. And we're working right now on closed loop take back programs. So we just launched a ref shoe take back program as well, and really focused on our work in circularity when it comes to collaboration with other stakeholders, so we can really drive that necessary infrastructure to be built to support more circular apparel business models and fiber to fiber recycling. So we're looking to kind of add to those numbers as well with more closed loop take back programs.
Thank you. And speaking of circularity, I think Professor Kennedy, you wanted to ask a question.
Thanks, Marcel. I did, when we sat down together before this, have a question about circularity, and it would have been about your ThreadUp and your amazing reimagined bags, Logan, which I do know a little bit about. But you've addressed those. But what excites me in both of those is those early design strategies where you are now designing for disassembly of that leather sandwich that you chatted about, and you are designing for reuse and resale, and that's really exciting. But there are costs involved, right, in the reverse logistics and the reimagination and the resale of all of this. So can we talk a little bit about cost? In our classes, our students often do kind of create take back all out, but then the costs always kind of end up that, well, are people going to pay more for this? Because sometimes it does end up costing more, right? So can you talk a little bit about that, please? How do you balance that?
Yeah, wonderful question. So I think in terms of circularity with costs, I would actually say that in terms of the design, it can lessen the cost. We just worked with the Ellen MacArthur jeans redesign collection, which a lot of brands did in terms of designing denim with material health, recyclability, and durability in mind. And we had cost savings because we were removing rivets and removing materials. And so I don't think that every kind of sustainable practice is always going to be more expensive. Of course, investing in cleaner processes and fair wages will likely at least have some impact that brands may pass through their customers, and as well as taking that margin hit. But it's really I see it as the right thing to do, right? We have to start with these big and small changes to have this transformational change that we need. I think there are certain other practices that brands can put in place. For example, transparency around manufacturing processes and supply chain. That doesn't cost any money, right? That's just something that you can do internally. If you switch to more organic or preferred fibers, there may be a cost increase, but there's also a lot of work being done in legislation right now for preferential tariffs for preferred materials. So I do think legislation hopefully will also support and kind of provide those incentives to brands in the near future as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean,
legislation. Sorry, Logan.
No, I would echo that. I mean, I think what we're seeing is, there might be a small uptick if you're transitioning to a preferred material, but at the same time, if it's what your customers are expecting of you and there's a demand for it, then if you run the economics on it, potentially you're selling the majority of your product at full price and you're not having to discount, and therefore it's not maybe as much of a margin hit as you initially thought it was, because you're not having to discount everything sort of at the end of the season. I mean, I think it definitely, there's sort of a couple different ways to slice it, and I think it's just a matter of how we evaluate cost and how we sort of figure out where those costs sit and how it hits within an organization, and ultimately, sort of as Carrie was mentioning, it's the expectation and it's what we need to happen. And so, we may not be in business much longer if we're not able to protect the resources that we have available to us.
Agreed.
And I just wanted to add, Logan, totally agree with you. And I forgot to mention that, our ThreadUp partnership, we worked with the New York NYU like Stern Group on looking at the ROI. And actually it was a positive impact in terms of revenue for us, because we were able to get more customers that way. And I think that's why, a lot of other brands also got on board with it. And if you're interested, they've done a lot of other analysis on return on investment within sustainability practices. And it's definitely worthwhile to look at that because it's surprising, for many people that you can actually sometimes see savings too.
Yeah, you mentioned so you mentioned like the return on investment and how other brands are kind of like hopping on this with sustainability, how it can actually be helpful to people's businesses. We actually have a question that kind of talks about like selling and convincing like this idea of sustainability to other brands, and it comes from Bianca. So she says, how can we take the work and progress that you're making towards sustainability and scale it up and sell it or convince large-scale retailers to incorporate these practices? So Logan or Carrie, which one of you can?
I mean, I'm happy to start on that one. I think it's definitely, what's been nice over the last several years, I think, and it really has been this major uptick. And I think this is both a blessing and a curse, to be totally frank, is that there is an increased demand, I think, and expectation from customers, which ultimately then, which then leads, I think, to increased demand within an organization to sort of meet those demands of customers, right? And so there is this understanding and this acknowledgement at sort of all levels of an organization that this is an important topic that people need to sort of pay attention to. We're also seeing, and I think it sort of varies if it's sort of publicly traded companies versus privately held companies, but we've seen a big push from investors, institutional investors, and specifically, big, large institutional investors who are starting to prioritize ESG as a measure or a metric or a threshold of which they're using for how they look at investment in a company, right? So Larry Fink is probably the most sort of vocal we've seen from BlackRock, who over the last 2 or 3 years has included in his annual letter a prioritization of the use of ESG frameworks like TCFD or SASB, and really this need and this desire for the organizations that they work with to prioritize environmental social governance. I think the question is always going to come in, how does that come forward? How are brands and companies able to sort of actualize and realize that? And then ultimately, how are they able to provide the data to support any sort of claims or any information that they share? And so I think, there is increased scrutiny, and there should be increased scrutiny from customers and from the market to make sure that brands are truly delivering on those commitments.
Thank you. And Carrie, what about you? So how are you taking those work in progresses and, convincing other large-scale retailers to incorporate these practices?
Yeah, I would echo, what Logan was saying. I think that there's a lot of work going on right now and changes in the investment world. And there's also, a sense of like collaboration among brands and sustainability. I'm not sure if it's that kind of understood by, or noticed by students, but most like sustainability professionals share and know one another in different companies and are really open was sharing those challenges and opportunities. We recently, went through a whole exercise on our climate positive roadmap and decided to share that publicly for other brands to also learn from. And there's a lot of brands that make things open source. And I think we're definitely continuing to go down that path. And organizations like the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and Apparel Impact Institute are also, putting out a lot more open source and documents, and also, getting the industry on kind of like aligned modules and roadmaps. And I think that's really going to help create this change and not have everybody so confused on like what's the next step should I take, right? We're going to have a more of an industry roadmap to get there. And really, there's a lot of brands and multi-stakeholder initiatives that are contributing to that.
Logan, I like when you answered the question that you talked about the demand and where it's coming from versus, investors versus consumers. And Carrie, I guess I'll ask the same question to you as well. But my question is, as sustainable initiatives have become more of a focus, there's been different schools of thought about who's actually driving these initiatives. Is it coming more so from investors, or if it's coming more so from consumers? I'm wondering what your take is on that at Tapestry.
So I think it's coming from everywhere. To be totally frank, I mean, I think we're an interesting organization in that we are public, right? So we have a couple different customers. We have the folks who are ultimately buying our products. So if you're buying direct from one of our brands, or you're buying from one of our stores, you're a customer. And so, that's a signal to us that some products are going to be better than others. If you're a wholesaler, you're a customer as well. And so we've started to see even some of the wholesale accounts. So, Nordstrom, Macy's, Zalando, who are also prioritizing this, starting to ask from us more information and making sure that we're very clear in what we're providing to them. And then, if you're an investor in Tapestry, you're also a customer, right? You're expecting some type of return on your investment, some type of financial gain as a result of it. And so you're making a decision by buying into the Tapestry organization. And so I think we're constantly trying to sort of meet those needs and meet those demands. And I think sort of the last customer group that we haven't spent a ton of time talking about, but is also a very real customer, is our own employees, right? And so there's a big element of sustainability, and there's a big element of employees wanting to be proud of the where they're working, but also in a hyper competitive talent market, there is an opportunity where you're fighting for the best talent, and one of those draws may be a clear signal to future employees that you're taking these commitments seriously, and that you're not just sort of making commitments and not able to deliver. So I definitely feel like we see the demand for an increased focus and increased measurable outputs of reduction in environmental impact from all areas of the market.
And Carrie, I'm sure at a company like Reformation, employees definitely carry a big deal of weight when it comes to wanting to push sustainability forward. Are you seeing it come more so from consumers, from investors? What's your take on that?
I would again echo Logan. I think we're seeing it come from all angles at this point. Also legislation and just other industry players out there. But I think, for us, for our customers, we really, release small source assortments of limited collections based on our customer demand. So, what starts as a sketch becomes a dress or a pair of jeans in as little as 45 days. So when we're designing and making, we really want to focus on what our customers want to wear now. So we produce in those limited quantities, and they allow us to avoid that excess inventory, which is so important, and to be really responsive to what our customer wants more of, whether that's in a category or a style or a material. We always talk to our customers about product expansion to get a better understanding of what they might want to see next from us as a brand. In fact, the idea to relaunch our shoes actually came from our customers. as it was our most searched category on the site. And I would just encourage, customers to keep asking more questions, right? And keep demanding more of brands, because it does influence brands' decisions, and it will ultimately influence the whole industry as well.
First, I agree with the open source data. It's really exciting. Our students always footprint garments, carbon footprint and virtually water footprint garments for some best-selling brands. And they always are shocked to find that, of course, the fabric or whatever the main material is the highest impacts there. And when they look at the life cycle stages of those, it's the raw materials. So how are you working in terms of raw materials towards any certifications or whatnot, and trying to lower those impacts there when they are not circular and they are virgin? Any just thoughts there before we move to the last Q in the box? And Kelly, I think you have a final question.
Yeah, I'm happy to start on that. I mean, I think we definitely prioritize certifications, because we want to, if we're going to speak about what we believe to be a preferred material, we want to make sure that we've got sort of the data to support it. I think we look at it both from a facility level, sort of manufacturing materials, as well as sort of specific fiber type of approach, and just making sure that providing both. What we did several months ago is when we sort of saw this continue to ramp up and really started to prioritize preferred materials is, we set guidelines internally to say, look, this is how we're going to define preferred materials. And we're not going to just say like everything has to be the best of the best immediately, but we're going to acknowledge the fact that we may need to sort of ease our way into this. And so we outline these preferred materials under this category of sort of baseline, better, and best, just acknowledging that there's a path forward, right? We're not going to necessarily be able to sort of go immediately to the best of the best, both from a cost perspective, but also just the need to trial and test and just make sure that we're still, again, delivering quality, durable products, and that we're meeting the demands of customers and the expectations that we've already sort of set in our history as an organization. And so I think that's been really helpful for the material development teams to really sort of have a bit of a roadmap on how they can progress forward. And then whenever possible, we, as I mentioned earlier, we have our goal focused on leather working group and making sure that we're only using gold and silver rated leather working group tanneries. We're not perfect yet. We're around 2/3 of the way. So 2/3 of our materials are coming from gold and silver rated. I think I'm almost over 95% are coming from LWG certified, but they're sort of certified or bronze, and sort of that 2/3 is the gold and the silver. But I think it's again sort of getting the right information in front of the right teams and helping them understand both measurably what the reduction is. And so we use tools like the Material Sustainability Index where it makes sense, and then ultimately making sure that the teams have a clear understanding of what they're working towards, right? And it's not just sort of this open black box of just go out and do it, but we're actually giving them sort of clear plans and targets to reach.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Logan. And yes, that LWC Leather Working Group is great. Carrie, you have a really cool way of ranking your preferred materials, or in language-wise, right?
Yes. So, we created our Better Fiber Standards a few years ago to really help guide and empower our design, sourcing, and PD teams to make more sustainable sourcing decisions. So we tried to make them, as holistic as possible. We looked at the MSI from HIG and, so water input, energy input, land use, but also commercial viability and microplastic shedding. and just like the potential for circularity. So our names, they're kind of divided between all stars. So those are mostly natural fibers, and then better than most. And then we have like C, D, and E. And it's on our website, actually. We're going to be doing our yearly update of that this year. And Textile Exchange is actually coming out with a preferred material standard as well, which we're excited to see. And, our goal with materials really right now is to get deeper in our supply chain. So we're really trying to focus on nominating at the farm and forest level. So we can really understand those impacts and the challenges and opportunities there. We recently launched a collection with Fiber Trace out of Australia, focused on regenerative cotton, and that allows us the traceability both at the physical side and digital to really ensure that we understand the full supply chain. Because certifications are great, but there's a lot that needs to be done. It's a paper trail. There's, sometimes it's not as transparent as we would like. So, we're really focused on looking at innovative ways to fully understand our supply chains.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, looking at those new and innovative ways to change the supply chains is definitely super important. And along with that, we have a question from Samuel that talks about sustainability and the future of it. So what does a sustainable future mean to you? And what can the public do to enforce sustainability? And then along with that, I have my own question. So do you currently see the future of fashion and retail as it relates to sustainability? So are we currently living in that future of sustainability in fashion? So Logan, if you want to answer that first.
Cool. Yeah, that's a crystal ball, see the future type question, which I can, take a crack at. I think you're starting to see the future of fashion and the future of sustainability in fashion start to play out at a couple of small different ways at a lot of different brands. I think some have been able to really lean into it more than others. I think, at Coach brand within the Tapestry group, with our Reloved, we've tried to take this approach where we've got a couple different sort of channels within that Reloved umbrella, right? So it's upcrafting product where we're basically saying, okay, this was damaged. We can't sell it firsthand to a customer. How would we fix it in a way to get it out back into the market? Because there's still some good miles left in it. There's still some good opportunity there. And then, can we set up opportunities to bring product back to us, back into our ecosystem? And so we've actually launched at 15 or 16 Coach stores buyback or take back of leather goods, which again is like our way to sort of test and learn and just understand, what are we going to get back? Are we going to get stuck with a bunch of stuff that we think we could, resell? Or could we repair it and then resell it? Or, if we're looking at product that's coming back to us that ultimately isn't able to be resold, could we rework it or remake it? And so then you get into sort of more pure types of upcycling, right? Where you're ultimately creating new products out of old products in a very concrete way. We've also seen quite a bit of success with what we call upwoven, where we're basically taking leather scraps and they're basically taking leather scraps from the cutting room floor. They're stripping them and ultimately gluing them sort of end to end, and then weaving a panel, which we're then constructing into a finished product. The challenge is obviously, you're limited by the number of products you're able to make by the amount of scrap material that you've got in work. And so if you've got one team that's focused on reducing and maximizing cutting room scraps, and the other team's trying to figure out, it creates a good synergy of, one team is able to find a solution for that scrap while the other is working on reducing it. The challenge is for the merchandisers who say, hey, I would really love glitter for fall. And you're like, well, we don't really have any glitter in work right now. So this is going to become sort of a managing of expectations from the product sort of merchandising side to make sure that we're not sort of like creating any issues for ourselves, right? Or you're sort of stuck with what is on the cutting room floor, and we're not gonna you're only allowed to use what's on the cutting room floor, and so then it just creates limited quantities. And so I think, you know, within the fashion industry, you're going to see this push towards, you know, re-commerce, resale, recycling, upcycling. I mean, pick a buzzword, and that's probably where we're headed. I think the question is, you know, that's right now it's fairly small for a lot of different companies as they try and figure out what that looks like. And the challenge is then to how do you shift sort of the other large portion of products that are being made from new materials, and just making sure that those new materials are made with sort of the best available options with the least environmental impact.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. It was really great to hear about how, you know, you're using those products and kind of creating more of that circular economy that I think sustainability is really going towards, especially with retail and fashion. So Carrie, if you want to just, you know, like finish up talking about, you know, what you think the sustainable future is at your company, and also how the public can be a part of that future with retail and sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're at the very beginning of seeing what I guess sustainable fashion industry is going to look like. You know, I think as Logan pointed out, like all those buzzwords that you're hearing right now is probably, like you said, where we're headed. So I think we're gonna definitely need to look at, you know, how we're designing, what materials we're using, because we won't have the resources available. So that's going to definitely impact business practices and you know, just how the industry works in the long term. For Reformation, you know, we want to be part of solutions to kind of clean that up, and whether that's helping, you know, to develop new fiber to fiber recycling, help bring more innovative next gen materials to market, or supporting farms in their transition to regenerative farming. That's where we really see that opportunity. And we want to collaborate with other, you know, like-minded brands, but also bring along brands that aren't quite there yet, that want to learn and do better, and work with our suppliers and, you know, other stakeholders to try to kind of overcome those challenges together and create innovative solutions, because one brand can't do it alone. And you know, we also want to look at kind of the same approach to how we're designing and using materials to different categories to become kind of a true lifestyle brand. I'd say on the consumer front, keep asking questions, keep looking at your own lifestyles, what you can do better. There's so many entrepreneurial companies and things coming out now too that I think will definitely impact, you know, where the industry is heading. So I would say follow your passions. And I think it will take you, you know, to the right place, right? And we all need to do that to protect our future.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, if we all, you know, just band together and really focus on sustainability, we can hopefully get towards that future that we all are hoping for. So thank you both so much for everything that you mentioned. It was a wonderful conversation. I think we all learned a lot. So thank you so much for that.
I also want to thank you, Carrie and Logan. Logan, your relove gives me so much hope. And Carrie, your small batch production that you've always done gives me, and everything that both of you do gives me so much hope. But thank you so much. Marcel, I'll pass it to you to take us out.
Yeah, I just walk away from this conversation with so much optimism. I think that inherently to work in sustainability, you have to be an optimistic person, have an optimistic point of view, when you look towards the future and the work that you're doing on a daily basis. The work that you guys both are doing is so inspiring. I said earlier today that when these conversations and these talks are going on, I don't want them to end. And it's the same feeling here. But thank you both so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Monica.
Thank you guys so much. Logan, Carrie, Andrea, Marcel, and Callie, thank you so much for such a wonderful panel.